Since the dawn of time, men have fantasized about being with multiple women at the same time. In many cultures today, it is acceptable to have more than one wife. It is even considered something of a status symbol in some corners of the world, a sign that you can afford to have a large family. And for many men today, the ultimate expression of this fantasy is to have twin wives. But in the Western world, this fantasy almost never becomes a reality. Perhaps most obviously is because it is incredibly rare to find two women who are willing to share a single partner. Jealousy simply makes this impractical. In addition, having two wives at the same time is considered a crime in most states, known in the USA as bigamy. With all that said, there are always a few individuals who buck the trend and manage to do the impossible. One of these individuals is a man named Walter Gibbs, who married two twins during his lifetime. Unfortunately for Walter, this age-old fantasy turned into a nightmare when his twin wives turned on him. Old Walter Gibbs lost his life when his love triangle trapped him and left him with nowhere to turn. But how did this murder play out? How did his twin wives plot his death? And how were they caught? Well, let's find out. Walter Gibbs was a wealthy old man in South Dakota who was described as a sucker for a hard luck story. He also preferred younger women, to the point where he married an 18-year-old at the age of 58. That 18-year-old was none other than Darlene Phillips. The marriage lasted for 10 years before ending in divorce. And next, Walter Gibbs turned to Darlene's twin sister, Dolores. This marriage also ended in divorce, at which point Walter remarried Darlene. Finally, he divorced Darlene and remarried Dolores, and once again, the second marriage to the second twin ended in divorce again. Having married and remarried each twin sister twice, old Walter Gibbs went back to square one. Seeing as he had already been married once before this string of divorces, he had been married and divorced a total of 5 times during his life. The twins were well known in the small town of Bison, which had a population of just 300. Described as crazier than a couple of bedbugs by one resident, the twins had a long history of crime in the area. Among other things, they were constantly starting fires, and they knew the local police chief so well that they viewed him almost like a family member. The sheriff later expressed confusion at their feelings towards him, stating, "The twins tell me I'm like a brother to them. I don't know why, because I've arrested them several times." At the time of his murder, Walter was 85 years old. At this point, he was extremely frail and nearing the end of his life. He was also increasingly kind and soft in his old age, and the twins were still a major part of his life. In fact, both women were living with Walter at the time of his death, despite being divorced from him years ago. Their sob story convinced him to take them in and support them financially as he approached his last days. However, some of Walter's friends and neighbors worried that the twins were taking advantage of him. Walter even allowed Darlene's then husband, Jeremy Phillips, to move in. It was quite an odd family dynamic, and it would prove to be his undoing. The arrangement was simple. Jeremy and the twins were supposed to take care of the old Walter. In exchange, he made Dolores Christensen his sole beneficiary. But Walter had added family members to the will, and when the twins and Jeremy learned about this, they began to plot Walter's murder. On April 1st in 1990, Walter Gibbs died in his home. At first, no foul play was suspected. The paramedics simply assumed that the old man had passed away from old age and he was transported to a nearby hospital. Doctors came to the conclusion that Walter had died from a heart attack as he had struggled with heart conditions in his later years. And that was that. No autopsy was performed, and life went on for the twins. But behind the scenes, the sisters had seemingly pulled off a murder they had been planning for months. Back in January of that year, they had convinced the old man to change his will, making Dolores the primary beneficiary and axing out his family members. The twins, and by extension, Jeremy, stood to inherit everything. As it turned out, the value of Gibbs' estate was relatively unimpressive, and the conspirators stood to receive just $178,000. Still, that's the equivalent of about $400,000 in today's money. With the will altered, the next stage of the plan was simple: kill Walter Gibbs. But they weren't exactly professionals when it came to the murder, and a number of their early attempts failed miserably. First, they tried messing with Gibbs' medication. He took nitroglycerin for his heart condition, and they tried to simply increase the dosage. Miraculously, Gibbs seemed to shrug it off without any issues whatsoever. Next, the twins tried mixing sleeping pills with Walter's milk of magnesia, but that didn't have any effect either. Darlene even tried to set fire to Walter's house while he was sleeping on the couch, but that was thwarted when a neighbor rushed in and helped the old man escape. Finally, the murderers tried to take a more direct approach. No one really knows what happened that day, but according to various accounts, Darlene and Jeremy smothered Walter with a pillow while he was in the living room. Dolores sat in another room, neither participating nor trying to stop what was happening. The murderers then called an ambulance and pretended that the old man had simply passed away from old age, and they almost got away with it. Months passed and people started to forget all about the death of Walter Gibbs. But soon enough, police started to wonder whether he had really passed away from natural causes. Darlene was initially sent to prison on arson charges after it became clear she had tried to burn down Walter's home. Sitting in her cell, she spoke with a fellow inmate named Gail Baskins and confessed that she had killed the old man. Baskins then turned around and immediately informed the authorities, who started looking into the murder with greater suspicion. Meanwhile, Walter's body was exhumed. Residue from sleeping pills was detected, which led the authorities to suspect foul play. It quickly became obvious that Jeremy Phillips had played a central role in the murder. Both twins claimed that he was the mastermind behind the entire plot, and Darlene said that she only went along with it because she was scared of her husband. Darlene first met Phillips while they were both serving out jail sentences. Both twins were connected romantically with Jeremy, who once served an 8-year sentence for rustling sheep and pigs. Dolores spent a couple of months in jail for helping him. In fact, it was later revealed that while Jeremy was married to Darlene, he was really in love with Dolores. This bizarre web of romantic connections and murder accusations led to considerable confusion when all three individuals were put on trial for murder. As you might have expected, everyone was pointing fingers at each other during their respective murder trials. Darlene claimed that she was just following her husband's orders, and she also alleged that Dolores had played a much more substantial role in the murder than she was letting on. On the other hand, Dolores also claimed that she was completely innocent. Her defense lawyer argued that since she had the intelligence of a second grader, she didn't really understand what was going on. Darlene had previously admitted to the authorities that she had held Walter's arms down while Jeremy smothered him with a pillow. Although she tried her best, there was just no way to convince the jury that she was innocent. On the other hand, Jeremy claimed that the entire debacle was just one big misunderstanding. Although he admitted to the murder, he argued that Walter didn't want to live anymore, and that he actually did the old man a favor by helping him commit suicide. As you might have expected, no one really bought the story. In the end, Jeremy pleaded guilty to murder and received a 50-year sentence. He also testified against Darlene, confirming that she had helped suffocate Walter and that he hadn't forced her to do it. Darlene was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and was given a life sentence. But what about the other twin? You might be surprised to learn that Dolores was acquitted on all charges. Apparently, the jury believed her story about having the mental capacity of an 8-year-old. In addition, the fact that she stayed in the kitchen while the other two killed Walter helped convince the jury that she was innocent. At the end of the day, those two twins shared everything. They committed crimes together, they burned down houses together, they shared husbands, they shared lovers, they shared the same household. But in the end, the only thing they didn't share was a prison cell.